Good afternoon and happy Eclipse Day. Good afternoon. We are doing it live right here in the 4 o'clock hour, news-driven hour, right after Ben Shapiro and just before the 790 KABC News Blitz with Randy Wang at 5, doing more at 4 in the afternoon. Mottek On Money live on the air, 790 KABC, streaming live online worldwide at KBC.com, and your on-demand Mottek On Money podcast at KBC.com, Apple, iTunes, YouTube, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Well, partial eclipse on Wall Street today for the stock market. We did see a mixed finish today with the three major averages off to a slow start as investors looked ahead to the release of another important inflation report later this week for more clarity perhaps on when the Fed might start cutting interest rates. The S&P 500 came in for a closing loss of 2 points today. The Dow down 11. The Nasdaq Composite moved higher by 5 points. We're coming off the worst week for the market since last March when we had several big bank failures. For the week, last week, the Dow had dropped 2.3%, the S&P 500 down 1%, and the Nasdaq fell 0.8%. The Dow had suffered its biggest weekly percentage drop since March of last year, when the stock market struggled to start. We've seen the market start to struggle this month and the second quarter of 2024 after a strong first quarter. The consumer discretionary sector, by the way, was the biggest gainer in the S&P 500 today, up nearly 0.8%. Shares of Tesla moving higher, up nearly 5% today, after CEO Elon Musk said the company would unveil its robo-taxi on August 8th. Government debt finishing at a 4-month high as far as yields are concerned, as investors awaited the March Consumer Price Index report. That'll be coming out on Wednesday. The yield in the 10-year note, the one that impacts the fixed-rate mortgage rates out there, ticked higher again today, and we'll have details on that coming up here. Fed funds futures, by the way, are now pointing to a 51.2% probability that the Fed will reduce its benchmark rate by a quarter percentage point in June. Traders in the Fed funds futures market showing signs of doubt now that the Fed might begin lowering interest rates in June, wavering ahead of that important inflation report we'll be getting later this week. We did see silver hit the highest seen since June of 2021. Gold prices also hitting a record high. We'll be taking a closer look at that, with gold hovering at around $2,356.30. Silver moving closer to $28 an ounce now, the highest since, June of 2021. We'll keeping an eye on all of that. Oil, meanwhile, pulling back slightly from its high point of the year, but it did settle above the session's lowest levels. We're watching what's happening in the Middle East, of course. Israel says it's withdrawing more soldiers from southern Gaza. Latest reports said both Israel and Hamas had sent delegations to Cairo for ceasefire talks, though some reports said there had been no progress. Reports earlier indicated there had been no progress toward a ceasefire agreement between the sides. Also, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu reportedly announced that a date has been set for an invasion of Rafah, which has been a hotly contested issue in the ongoing talks between Israel and Hamas. I'll be discussing the latest on the Middle East crisis this afternoon with Rabbi Abraham Cooper, Associate Dean and Director of Global Social Action for the Simon Wiesenthal Center in West Los Angeles. We did see the price of oil today fall 48 cents to $86.43 a barrel, and Brent crude in London still above $90 a barrel, declining 79 cents to $90.38 a barrel. Working from home and teleworking getting a new look now at the IRS after one of its agents got busted after being found golfing on the clock more than 160 times. This at a time where the current IRS chief recently said only half of IRS employees bother to come into an office, while the other half of IRS employees come into the office. I'll discuss that report and more with taxpayer advocate Grover Norquist, president of Americans for Tax Reform, as we get to the bottom of that story. But first, on your money, the markets, and the economy, joining us live now, investment expert Gabriel Wisdom, managing director of American Money Management and author of Wisdom on Value Investing. Gabriel Wisdom, thank you very much for taking the call here. Hope you survived the eclipse today. And on Wall Street, we saw a partial eclipse here as far as prices are concerned. Give us an update on what you're seeing here today.
Well, Frank, I did see the partial eclipse, but I can't say it changed my life. We do know it helped the economy a bit. Big bucks for Airbnb owners in the path of totality. And then the paper glasses industry saw a big boost. And apparently several thousand couples decided to tie the knot during totality. They've got married while the sun was blocked. So it's pretty special there. Nobody can predict the future. We know that in the financial markets. The first quarter of this year, the S&P 500 did something that's quite rare. It returned 10.2%. That includes dividends paid to shareholders. We know what the factors were. We had better than expected growth in revenues and earnings in the fourth quarter. Everybody's so excited about artificial intelligence and productivity that brings. And Wall Street's increasingly confident that we're going to have a soft landing. But additionally, Wall Street's a little too over enthusiastic for a rate cut. Now, first quarter returns of 10%, like we had this year, have only occurred 11 times since the S&P 500 began in 1957. If history's any guide, that would tell us the market is headed higher.
In the meantime, gold at record highs, silver also along for the ride here now, just at a time when we're told inflation is supposedly easing. What do you make of this run up here?
Well, Frank, the global central banks, India, mostly China, have been adding to their gold reserves according to the World Gold Council's numbers from February, the most recent numbers we have. China's central bank there purchased gold for its reserves for the 17th straight month. And we know that all the gold that's ever been mined is still around. And now silver, on the other hand, is an industrial application as well as it can be used as a currency. It's very difficult to extract silver from the Earth's crust, but both have been undervalued as per their old highs in the mid-1980s. Inflation adjusted, both gold and silver should be higher, and apparently the central banks around the world, including our own U.S. central bank, which holds gold, has been acquiring it, understands this.
All right, from gold chain to blockchain, we saw an impressive rebound for Bitcoin over the weekend, and right now Bitcoin is back above almost back to 72,000 here. What about the cryptos, which rebounded over the weekend?
Well, it's quite remarkable, really. I would say if Bitcoin is not a currency, cryptocurrencies are not currencies, they're certainly collectibles, the most popular among them anyway. From what I'm told, there's some 9,000 different cryptocurrencies in the market, but Bitcoin is the 800-pound gorilla. It's the benchmark, and there'll be less of it in circulation by the middle of this month when they do the occasional halving. So I can see why it's run up. Plus, Wall Street's excited about getting in the middle. I mean, that's the role Wall Street plays so often is in the middle. Win, lose, or draw, they get the trade. So we have these exchange-traded funds. They're being marketed, and Bitcoin's being accumulated mostly by retail investors.
All right, inflation worries. We'll be getting a new reading this week. The Consumer Price Index will be coming out, and certainly I'm sure you noticed, since you're one of us, that gas prices have been rising dramatically lately here in Southern California as well as elsewhere, as the price of oil has hit a new high for this year, both here as well as in London. The Brent crude price is hovering above $90 a barrel. Where do you see the price of oil go from here, given the upheaval we're seeing in the Middle East?
Well, I think it is probably going to go higher, Frank. When you consider that the Permian Basin has had which is some 75,000 square miles in the Texas Panhandle area, has been the center of oil drilling in this part of the world over the past 100 years. It's now harder than ever to extract oil. Regulations. So that part of the Permian, which stretches from Texas into New Mexico, is much quieter. So we're seeing more mergers and acquisitions. Major oil companies want to buy other major oil companies. I think that leads to higher prices still.
All right. Speaking of higher prices, Amazon stock hitting an all-time high today, and it looks like Elon Musk has moved down the wealthy list, although he did pop today. Looks like at the moment Jeff Bezos, the head of Amazon, and Bernard Arnault, the head of Louis Vuitton, have been fighting for the top spot as wealthiest person in the world. But it looks like it was a good day for Jeff Bezos here.
Yeah. It was, but Amazon has finally gone above its highs of a few years ago. It got hit very, very hard in 2022, along with the so-called Magnificent Seven companies. They all sold off dramatically, which proves that you need to be buying when everyone's complaining. And if you're going to sell, you sell when they're celebrating. Right now, they're celebrating. So if you own these stocks, you at least want to trim your positions right along. But I mean, you have to be careful in this kind of market. It was Raphael Bostic, President and CEO of the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, that said we have a period of pent up exuberance, and sure enough, you can feel it with the Fed's hesitation to reduce or bring down interest rates.
Raphael Bostic, of course, the former USC professor who is the current Atlanta Fed president. Longtime guest on this program, by the way, during the financial crisis. Hopefully we'll be able to reconnect with him at some point. I know they came out with a assessment recently expecting one rate cut this year, and we'll try to get that information out as well when we have a chance to speak with him at some point. But given the cards on the table here and the jobs report on Friday, and now another inflation report coming out, when do you expect the Fed to start lowering rates?
Frank, I would say there's a chance that the Federal Reserve will lower rates fractionally one time this year. Now, Jamie Dimon, the CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase, our largest bank, and one of the largest banks in the world, just came out with the new shareholder letter, which he authored. That was released today, and he said in the letter he's worried about a number of risks to a resilient U.S. economy, and it would lead to stickier inflation and higher interest rates than markets expect. He said that the bank is prepared for interest rates to go 8% or higher. And he was citing large amounts of government spending efforts and the Federal Reserve's efforts to shrink the balance sheet, withdraw capital from the markets, and then, of course, the ongoing wars in the Middle East and the Ukraine and their potential to disrupt the supply chain.
All right. In the meantime, bond yields have moved higher. The yield on the 10-year note, the one that impacts the fixed rate mortgage rates, moving higher lately. Nervous time again in real estate. What do you see ahead there?
Well, I keep expecting interest rate real estate, residential real estate in the Southland to level off or even adjust downward a bit. It's more difficult for young people, young couples who buy, starter homes now in the $700,000-800,000 range, $1 million for a nice single family home, $500,000 for a condo. I mean, that's a lot of money. So who do they rely upon? It isn't the traditional bank. It's the savings institution called mom and dad and grandma and grandpa. And how long can that last? So I would think that real estate is due for an adjustment downward. In the long run, it's higher. But in the short run, I think I'd be careful.
All right. At this point, Gabriel Wisdom, where are you putting money now and or taking it off the table?
Well, if we get a good consumer price index report this week, Frank, and we see, all those who've been calling a top in the market, if we see them get more excited about a peak and a top, and they cry sell, 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 then I want to be a buyer, because usually, in even a little bit of a dip, that's a short-term buying opportunity. So you could add to your AI positions, and even in NVIDIA, ARM, AMD. You could buy the Ozempic-related companies like Novartis or Lilly. The financials and the industrials still look good to me. If you like Bitcoin and the cryptos, you can get into either the miners or the ETFs for Bitcoin. And then finally, the small cap area looks very appealing. Small, rapidly growing companies have been underpriced for some time.
All right. Yeah. Magnificent 7 down to the Fab 4 maybe, and the Magnificent 1, as it's known, NVIDIA pulling back today to around 871 and change. What about Apple? Let me ask you the big question here. Has Apple bottomed?
Well, I think it's closer to a bottom than it is anything else. The company has so much cash that they could double the dividend, and they've been raising the dividend aggressively every year for some time now, and they could double what they pay out, much like MasterCard and Visa companies did a few years ago when their stocks were soft, and that brought a lot of interest, and they continue to pay higher and higher dividends. So tech firms like Apple, there's Amazon, Google, Meta, Microsoft, they're all wanting, if they're not paying dividends now, they're going to pay dividends. Meta, Facebook, I believe doesn't have a policy yet. But on the flip side, the U.S. is running the risk of running short of power because of the power-hungry data centers and the clean technology factories that are part and parcel of AI in these companies. So they're going to be making major investments in this area.
Money Manager Gabriel Wisdom, Managing Director of American Money Management and author of Wisdom on Value Investing. Gabriel, it's always great to have you with us. Thank you very much for taking the call this afternoon.
Thank you, Frank.
And right out to the freeways now here in 790 KABC. Folks, people like you and me have our ear to the ground on all things business. We like to be informed and well prepared. And as important as finance is, I want you to have a plan in case you're hit by someone not paying attention to the road. Thinking ahead serves us well, and even still, we can get caught off guard as people are so focused on their destination that they might not have a plan in case they're in an accident that is not their fault. That's why I encourage you to put my friend, Attorney Clark Fielding's number in your phone, 833-88-SHARK. So if you're in an accident, you'll be ready with your strategy to make Clark Fielding your very first call. Fielding Law aims for the highest possible settlements, considering you might need long-term care, rehab, compensation for lost wages, and any ongoing physical or emotional pain. So if you're hurt in any kind of accident, call for a free consultation with Fielding Law. You can trust them. They're honest, respected, and your strategy in case you get into that unexpected accident. Motorcycle, truck, pedestrian, scooter, hit and run, boating, or bike accidents, you name it. The number to call, 833-88-SHARK. That's 833-88-SHARK, or go to clarkthesharklaw.com. Mottek On Money continues here, 790 KABC. Good afternoon. We are doing it live. Partial eclipse on Wall Street today as far as stock prices are concerned. The Dow down 11 points to 38,893 to kick off the new week. Coming off that big drop last week, we saw the market's worst week of the year so far last week. In fact, it was the worst week seen since March of last year when we had those three big bank failures around that time. The S&P 500 pulling back 2 points today at 5202, and the Nasdaq managed a closing gain of 5 points at 16,254. Apple down $1.13 at 168 and change. We see NVIDIA down nearly $9 today at $871.33. Amazon up 12 cents at 185.19, kissing record highs today. Meta pulling back $8 and change to $519 and change. Microsoft down nearly $1 at $424.59. Google managed a closing gain of more than $2 at $154.85. And Tesla moving higher today by more than $8, back to $172.98. Tesla trying to get back into that Magnificent Seven group. I think I just mentioned all the Magnificent Seven names, including the so-called Magnificent One, which is NVIDIA, pulling back from its recent highs. The price of oil, meanwhile, moving higher, up 16 cents at $86.59 a barrel, still above $90 a barrel in London. The yield in the 10-year note now is up to 4.43%. That's the one that impacts the fixed-rate mortgage rates. Taking a look at the cryptos now, Bitcoin roared back over the weekend. It was down around $65K. Now it's just shy of $72,000, up $71 at $71,741. Ethereum up 4 at $3,694. And Doge also rebounding over the weekend, now at 20 cents. And now the latest news for you right here on 790 KABC. Mottek On Money continues here, 790 KABC. Good afternoon. Working from home and teleworking, getting a new look now at the IRS after one of its agents got busted for going golfing on the clock more than 160 times. This at a time when the current IRS chief recently said only half of IRS employees bother to come into an office. Let's bring in taxpayer advocate Grover Norquist now, president of Americans for Tax Reform. Want to tee you up for this one. Grover, take it from the top and tell us what we need to know about this IRS agent caught playing golf, nearly 170 times during the workday?
Yes, plus 29 times when he called in sick. So the 168 times he said he was at home working. The 9 times he said he was sick, homesick. He got caught because somebody saw him on the golf course and sent a note in anonymously. The IRS doesn't monitor the people who claim to be working at home. How much? Well, they missed a guy out hundreds of times on the golf course when he was supposed to be working. They obviously don't look to see whether you're working on your computer or answering your phones. So what monitoring is done? Well, the Inspector General, which was reporting on this stuff, and the court, this went to court. The union, there is a union for IRS agents. Its contributions are more than 90% to Democrats. And they said, no, this took 3 years, by the way, to decide that there was a problem with this. The IRS union said, oh, there's nothing wrong here. I don't know what you guys are so upset about. That and they were only caught not because the IRS had any internal monitoring, but because a third person who saw him at the golf course all the time, who I think himself or herself was retired and perhaps not happy about this. And now what's going on? This is a huge, huge problem. And it's not easily fixed.
On there live with Grover Norquist, America's leading taxpayer advocate. So when you talk about IRS agents working remotely, where are they? On their kitchen table or living room sofa or in bed, or where do they work remotely?
Or the golf course. Well, first of all, we don't know.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Country club.
The IRS evidently, and the court mentioned this in its decision, which said, yes, you can fire this person, you stupid idiots. Why are you asking us this question? Well, I didn't say it quite like that, but they did say that one of the reasons this happened is that there is no serious mechanism for checking. We had the head of the IRS, Werfel, speaking to the House of Representatives Ways and Means Committee, which oversees him, and he sat there with a straight face. These people are all at home. They're all working hard. There's no reason to think anything is going on other than people are at home working like they say. This guy isn't even trying. He isn't looking. This case had been going on for years. He knew about this case, and he lied to the members of Congress and said, oh, yeah, we're on top of this stuff. And then they keep asking for $80 billion more money for an agency that needs to be dramatically reformed. This is a waste of taxpayers' money. This is insulting. Okay, the guys who come and yell at you for not sending more money into the government, right, are wasting the government's money. They're not exactly the best advertisement for, boy, we can spend your money more wisely than you can.
So they still call it telework. I guess remote work is a bit more of a current term here, right? So what are they going to do about it?
Right now, the IRS says they're going to do nothing about it. And beyond that, not only do they let you work at home, and more than half of the people never show up, okay? And even in headquarters, where you think everyone would show up, I could understand, in theory, somebody could work at home for certain jobs, but to be at headquarters, half of the people are not there. And they wouldn't tell you the other half how often they're there, which means it's a very small number. They would tell you if it was 90%. They would tell you if it was 80%. They're not telling us how many of the half who do come, how often who come at all, are actually there. This is a huge problem, and it's not getting fixed. They said, you know what? You're supposed to keep your people's private tax data on a secure system at the office. But then they said, well, you could use your own, bring your own device, BYOD. Bring your own device. You could have your iPad, and you could use that at the office. Well, okay, maybe, but I can't imagine that your iPad is more secure than something that's, sitting there hooked up to what could be serious protections. But now you can use your own personal iPad, take it home. All your family stuff can be on. Your kids could be playing games on it at any given time. It can get left on the subway or at the restaurant for anybody to pick up, and they do not monitor this. They do not check to see whether people's data is safe and secure. There was the question of whether TikTok would allow the Chinese to get into certain things. And they've discovered, not the IRS, but the inspectors general who look at the IRS when they're not behaving, they found that many people had TikTok. It's against the law for any government agency in the United States to have TikTok on their computers because it may make them vulnerable to China looking at what's over there. And that's supposed to go for your own personal device if you're at the IRS. But when they were caught with many, many people doing that, they sent a nasty letter back to the inspector general saying, our people have rights, you know. What? Yeah, they have the right to be unserious about the security of your data. That's what they told the inspector general, who pointed out that they weren't doing, that they were breaking the law. 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 And the IRS notice back was, we don't care. We just don't.
Were they breaking the law? No, just kidding. Let me ask you this. We're on the air with Grover Norquist, the leading taxpayer advocate, and that goes for both the Republicans and Democrats. We're all taxpayers here, President of Americans for Tax Reform. So thank you for looking out for us. Another agency that's gotten your attention here, I see, is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And this proposed rule on overdraft fees, looks like there's more than meets the eye here, too. Grover, tell us about that.
I unfortunately don't have that one in front of me.
Yeah, let me just remind you that this is the one that that responding to the CFPB's rule on overdraft fees. Looks like I see Americans for Tax Reform submitted a comment letter responding to that Bureau's proposed rule entitled Overdraft Lending, Very Large Financial Institutions. The group requesting the Bureau to withdraw the rule upon finding it to be a thinly veiled arbitrary exercise of power exceeding the agency's statutory authority. And the letter, of course, can be read at the atr.org website. So once again, we see something called something that it isn't. And we have to be aware of this in propositions here in California and legislation nowadays when something is called one thing and it means something else.
Well, and sadly, we do enough letters like that. And I'd forgotten about that one. Yes, that is an agency that keeps expanding its claim to power, okay? And it funds itself. It's not taxpayer funded. They actually go out and take their own money. It's not appropriated by Congress. It was designed to not be responsible to anyone. And we found that there's a reason for that. It expects to and plans to expand its powers way beyond anything Congress agreed to. But since Congress can't defund it or cut its funding, they just sort of, stub their nose at any criticism. So I guess we're going to be writing more letters like that.
Yeah. In the meantime, we got tax day, just about a week away here now, and most people either filed their 2023 returns or are scrambling to meet that April 15th deadline. How's it going so far, and what is it going to look like next year if President Biden's tax plans take effect?
Well, that we actually know because the president has written his list. He wants to take the corporate rate to 28%. It's at 21 now. He wants to take it up higher than China, higher than Britain, higher than France. He wants to take the tax on small business to about 39% plus, and that is pass-throughs and partnerships, mostly small businesses where people pay their taxes to their personal rate. Wants to take that up to a very high level, again, much higher than our European and Asian competitors. He wants to take the capital gains tax to 44.6%. He actually did the math for everybody, 44.6%, which is almost double. And what does it do? Well, let's see, China is at 20. We would be at 44.6. Where do you think an investor would put his money? In Biden's America or in China? Or the rest of the world, the average is under 19%. So not just China that's smarter and better than Biden. It's everybody has lower rates than Biden wants to put on. He wants to add an additional death tax, which is that you would be taxed on the step-up in basis, which means when he inflates the currency by 18%, and whatever you hand over to your children is now worth 18% less, but it looks like you've got all this money, and they get taxed. You will be taxed. Your children will be taxed, the death tax, on the inflation that took place during your life. All the cockamamie things to do is to tell somebody that as they work all their life and they're going to have to pay taxes on the inflation that took place during their time. So you pay taxes on imaginary expenditures.
Isn't that something? We'll have to stop there, Grover. Well, thank you very much for joining us live here. That is Grover Norquist, President of Americans for Tax Reform. You got to send another letter and recommend an IRS Form 4 for that golfer there at the IRS so he can fill it out. Grover, thank you very much for joining us live here this afternoon. Mottek on Money on 790 KABC. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KABC following the latest developments in the Middle East, with Israel saying it's withdrawing some soldiers from southern Gaza. The latest reports said both Israel and Hamas had sent delegations to Egypt for ceasefire talks, though some reports said there had been no progress. The war started 6 months ago after Hamas terrorists attacked Israel and killed at least 1,200 people and took more than 100 hostages. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu reportedly announcing a date, meanwhile, has been set for an invasion of Rafah, which has been a hotly contested issue in the ongoing talks between Israel and Hamas. Closer to home, Santa Monica police investigating anti-Semitic graffiti found around the city over the weekend. Joining us live now is Rabbi Abraham Cooper, Associate Dean and Director of Global Social Action for the Simon Wiesenthal Center in West Los Angeles. Rabbi Cooper, thank you very much for taking the call here, and give us an update on the news that you're getting from Israel and the very latest on the Israel-Hamas war.
Well, thank you, Frank. The news, obviously, from Israel is right now, I think, very, very sober and sobering. Israel has pulled out temporarily almost all of its soldiers, all of them actually, from southern Gaza, where Rafah is located. But it does sound like it's going to be temporary. My guess would be that it was done in part because of the pressure from President Biden, but also to give yet another chance to try to free the remaining hostages. But Hamas has now come back yet again, and at least one of their spokespeople said that they reject, the latest developments. I think, in all likelihood, Israel will go in and try to finish with Hamas because they continue to insist that last October 7th was just the first of many. And if that kind of Nazi behavior, the mass murders, the mass rapes, the kidnappings, the hostage taking now for 6 months, and the likelihood that only a few of those hostages at this point may even still be alive. Israel really doesn't have a choice. The entire Israel, and including, if you want to include the area of Gaza, is about the size of New Jersey. You cannot leave that kind of potent terrorist Iranian-backed group with still tens of thousands of soldiers just free to reconstitute and start that kind of behavior all over again. And then on top of that, it appears that Israel and Hezbollah are inching closer and closer to all-out war, which would be devastating to the people of northern Israel, but also of southern Lebanon. These are civilian populations who don't want war. They're, as far as the southern Lebanese, they've been pretty much taken over by Hezbollah with their hundreds of thousands of missiles, capable of doing much greater damage than even Hamas. It's a terrible scenario. It's hard to see where diplomacy is going to work. And on top of that, you have the direct Iranian threat to retaliate against Israel for taking out two of their top terrorist generals. I'll be over in Israel starting next week. I hope and pray for the sake of my family and all the families that things will quiet down. But I think just realistically speaking right now, we're looking all of us are looking for leadership and vision, and I'm afraid that will probably have to wait till the day after this next round of fighting ends.
In the meantime, the U.S. and Israel are on high alert for any Iranian military moves. We're on the air live with Rabbi Abraham Cooper, and we have a limited amount of time here, but a couple of other very important stories. The sickening incidents of anti-Semitic graffiti around Santa Monica. Give us your reaction to that latest news here.
Well, the intake of incidents around the country, sometimes on campuses, more often than not in social media, but also in neighborhoods and mailboxes on the street of the Nazi swastikas and the other anti-Semitic graffiti. It does all add up to a new normal, the new normal where the presentation, an exhibition of hatred in the open in the mainstream of our society, that becomes the new normal. That's a disaster for our community, but I'm afraid also it eventually will impact on many, many other communities. So I commend the Santa Monica police for doing their best to try to figure out who did it. And if they find these individuals, they need to be held accountable. I think that's the most important element of all. And one other thing I'd like to bring up personally is, I was sued recently by Louis Farrakhan, along with the Simon Wiesenthal Center and the Anti-Defamation League. And late last week, the court thankfully vacated the lawsuit. But in thinking about Farrakhan, I just saw another story come across almost simultaneously that Cecil Chip Murray, the late, great head of the First AME Church here in Los Angeles for a generation, a truly great faith leader who was a very important leader for all Angelenos during and after the LA riots. He passed, I think, at the age way up there in his 90s. And so I was just reflecting on two quote-unquote faith leaders, one who was promoting hate, the other hope, one who sought to divide people, and one, by virtue of his great leadership, brought very diverse people in our great Los Angeles together with tremendously positive, you might say, dividends for decades here in LA. Chip Murray is the kind of spiritual leader that I hope will inspire others who are already faith leaders and those considering getting involved in this area about how one person can make a difference. Thankfully, the Chip Murrays of the world have been more impactful here in Los Angeles than the Louis Farrakhan's. But at the end of the day, they're both powerhouses. They both knew how to motivate people. One motivated for hate, and one motivated for hope.
Rabbi, thank you very much for coming to the line today. We'll keep an open line to you. We wish you safe travels to Israel. Rabbi Abraham Cooper, Associate Dean and Director of Global Social Action for the Simon Wiesenthal Center in West Los Angeles. Thank you very much for joining us live here this afternoon.
Thank you, Frank.
Coming up next, it's the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang. I'll be back tomorrow at 4 here on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC.
The countdown is on for the 2024 NFL Draft, presented by Bud Light, live from Detroit, and you can attend in person for free.
Welcome to the NFL Draft.
See the next NFL stars and experience the ultimate NFL Fan Festival, featuring live concerts, interactive games, player autographs, and more. The NFL Draft, presented by Bud Light, April 25th through 27th. Visit NFL.com/draft access to register for free entry today.